It is a huge honor to have you here. And we started talking just a little bit before this, and so now I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. It's been a really intense couple of weeks in Tulsa specifically, and I'd say an intense few months for our country. So it's really important to remember what brings us together and what we have in common and what we're fighting for together. And sometimes it seems like that focus on unity can gloss over or allows us to ignore some of the more challenging things that we also need to talk about, which are the differences between us. And before we get into that territory, though, the question I really want to start with is, how are you taking care of yourself? Because it's really true that this is traumatic, and this is, we all have different traumas in our lives, but Black Americans have a really profound 400-year history of trauma in this country. And I know just a little bit about trauma, and I know it affects us physiologically and cognitively and emotionally. It's like on every level. And you are a woman with a mission and a powerful presence and voice. And I know that I know the Black women I work with and that are listening to us would love to hear how you maintain, how you sustain, how you feed yourself.
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for even thinking about me to be here in this space. That question, how am I taking care of myself? I was hoping that you wouldn't ask that, and I'm going to be transparent today throughout this conversation, because for the last few years and really throughout my career, I've been this strong Black woman, and I've felt like I've had to be that kingpin in every area of my life, and I've never been vulnerable to share with people that, hey, you can be tired. You can take a break. And so I hate that you asked that question because I get it every single day.
Oh, really?
Really? Yeah, and so I'm not doing a good job at it.
Yeah, I join you in that. Neither am I.
I'm not doing a good job at all because I'm just a go-getter. When I see that something needs to be done, I do it. When I see that there's an injustice or a threat, I'm getting up like I'm Superwoman trying to save the day, and I don't know anything else. I feel like I've been fighting all of my life, whether it's injustice, whether it's systemic racism, and I can truly start by just sharing my story and the fights that I just deal with in my own family. Back in 2008, we dealt with gun violence, where my nephews and cousins were shot and killed. Strict case of mistaken identity, leaving church. They were going to Greenwood, right there off of Greenwood, where Transformations used to be, under Gary McIntosh. And 2 o'clock, broad daylight Sunday, a car drove up next to their car and sprayed it up with an assault rifle, an AR-15. My nephew Donovan was 16 years old. He was hit 36 times. He didn't make it. His brother Adrian, they were 11 months apart. He was 15, shot in the spinal cord, paralyzed from the waist down, T7. My first cousin Jeremy, his right eye was shot out. Bullet went through his brachial plexus, paralyzed him. He was going to college on a band scholarship, and another cousin hit in the stomach. And so it was like our mini 9/11 right here in Tulsa. And so I flew back from Tulsa, from Montgomery, living in Montgomery at the time, and made it to my nephew's room. They told him he would never walk again, and he kicked all of the doctors out. And he said, my aunt, she's a physical therapist, she's a doctor, she's going to help me walk again. And so when I got to his room, he was holding a Bible. And he said, Auntie, tell them I'm going to walk again. And knowing what I knew about spinal cord injuries, even though my family, we're a family of faith and we believe in divine healing, I had to tell him, just focus on getting well. We're going to work this out. And I left out of that room, went down the hall. Hillcrest Hospital, and I broke down. But what I told myself is that I'm going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to help my nephew walk again. He was being recruited by colleges all over the country to play basketball in the 10th grade. And so I exhausted all my resources, got a medical helicopter, flew him to Denver, to Craig's Rehab Hospital, the best in the world, to try to fight this battle. You know, I researched stem cell research to see if I did it all. And I made that my life's mission. And I felt like I lost and I failed my nephew. That's how I really felt. And then fast forward, his dad, my brother, Joey, my oldest brother, we lost the battle to colon cancer. But I made it my life's mission to fight for a cure. 2 years, I fought for a cure. And I ended up in St. John's Hospital, and I watched my brother take his last breath. And he told everybody that my little big sister is going to help me beat this because I was in healthcare. And I felt guilty, and I felt like I lost again. And then fast forward 2016, my twin brother lost to police brutality. And I made a promise that I would not lose this fight. And so when you say, how are you taking care of yourself? I just feel like I haven't had a chance to do that because I went from one battle to the next battle to the next battle. Not because of something I did or my family did. You know, my parents are ministers, and they've been pillars in this community, and they've taught us love, and they've done everything they could to just be model citizens and teach their kids. But, I've often asked God, why us? Why? And they say, you're not supposed to question God. But I think about when Jesus hung on that cross and he asked God, why hast thou forsaken me? And I believe that when you question God, at least I know that you believe in a higher power. You have a relationship with somebody, and so you should be able to ask your father, your dad questions, or your mother, however you see that higher power. And so I need to do a better job at taking care of myself, but I will say this, have a wonderful and an amazing support system. As a matter of fact, I blacked out at the event, but I got up, they gave me water, and I said, we have to get through this. When I got on stage, I had Jamal Dyer standing behind me just in case my knees went out because I was weak. But I knew that this fight and this weekend needed me, and so.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think so much in those stories, and I'm sorry you have to tell the stories again and again, but I know you're telling the stories with a purpose, and I know it's important for us to hear the stories again, especially because I know that white people have these these automatic defenses that go up so that they can't really hear sometimes the stories of violence against Black people the same way that they hear stories about violence against white people. So I think in this setting, maybe there's a chance that some people will hear things in a new way that they haven't heard before. So I'm sorry and thank you. And when I hear you talk about, just kind of being that warrior because you have to do this and because these are your loved ones and this is the reality and this is what your life is about, and your angels, the people stand behind you and people you can lean on, and then here I am. I think it's a little complicated for white activists today, I'd say, or people who call ourselves white allies, to know how to support and how to be part of the movement. I think a lot of white women, maybe more older white women, but of all ages, really, from the work I do with white people. You've probably heard of Rewire, this program we do for white people about rewiring your racial consciousness, right? So it's white people really studying history, understanding their own culture and all the things they take for granted, and starting to see the blind spots. And I think this is an incredible moment in history, right? Because people like you are speaking out, and because we're seeing on our phones, we're seeing these horrendous acts of violence, and you've had all this happen in one family. There's something that happened with George Floyd's murder, it seems. Somehow people saw, white people, I think specifically, what they saw created so much dissonance with what they believe, what their core values are. Something kind of clicked, and they understood. I think many white people are understanding for the first time that Black lives have to matter if all lives are going to matter, right? Like, so all of a sudden there's like no contradiction. All that resistance for these past 10 years, right? Since Trayvon and from there, it's changing. And people are like, yeah, Black lives matter. So what would you say about that? What's the role of the white ally? What do you want white people to be doing right now, this time in history?
Well, I don't think as a Black person it's our burden to try to help you all figure that out. And so, I'm really...
So even the question.
Yeah, I'm really
not my...
glad at the fact that you all have this Rewire platform. And I think about a lot of the white allies that I currently work with, like Aware Tulsa and Surge, who actually flew in this past weekend, and all they do is fight white supremacy, a bunch of white folks who fight white supremacy for Black lives, in the name of Black lives. And so those organizations, their main goal is to teach and rewire and help white people grow a new brain, if that makes sense.
Totally.
To figure out how to be a support system for us, because the burdens that we carry, it's just so much. And so to have to carry the burdens that we carry and get up every day and fight simply because of the color of our skin, and then teach white people how to be of support is exhausting. So I'm thankful for Rewire, Aware, Surge. But a good white ally, they do just that. They support. They call out other white folks. They call them compassionate call-outs. And there's a way that you do that. I'm open for the hard conversations. I'm glad that I'm sitting here with you and that we're talking about the differences and we're being honest and transparent. But I've been in situations and spaces where, we want to be inclusive. We need Dr. Crutcher at the table. But once I get to the table, once I start to raise and elevate my voice, people don't really want to hear what I have to say. They want the illusion of inclusion. The illusion of inclusion, just to say, we're inclusive. But our voices are never really weighed when we're at these powerful tables. And so I want for our white allies to really do a deeper dive and just open your eyes and see what's happening. If you're at a table and everyone looks like you, then you may want to rethink, the mission of your organization. You may want to rethink, and if this organization is talking about elevating and serving the least of these, what you do for me without me, you need my lived experience trumps all of your academia, all of your philosophical waxing every day of the week. Those lived experiences, they should really, really matter. And so I work with some wonderful allies. I can't say enough. At every event, I can just use All Souls as an example. When we were right here on Brookside and we shut down Brookside and shut down the interstate, I didn't have to worry about water. I didn't have to worry about, if we needed nurses or doctors or snacks or anything. They were there. And it was beautiful. And so just being there to support and making sure that you value our lived experiences and that you embrace those experiences and not suppress, but just undergird. And that's what a good white ally does, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And it was an honor to be there that day at the protest.
Yeah.
The I Can't Breathe protest, and to really powerful experience to lie down in the middle of those intersections and to keep moving down Peoria and then be like, I think we're headed to the highway. I don't know where we're headed. I think we're going to the highway. And like running to see.
And that was
It was
spiritual.
an amazing day.
We had no idea.
It felt like that. It felt like it was evolving, and I could kind of see y'all talking to each other and making decisions. And
Yeah.
I felt like we were just responding in the moment. There's been a lot of frustration in the city. Marlin and I are part of those kind of conversations all the time.
And that's
also,
good.
Yeah, hard and good. That's
Good,
nice to
but
hear.
hard.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good.
I believe that, greatness and magic happens outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah, and I had a great recent conversation about so what's happening in Tulsa right now is so these sort of white people waking up to their own whiteness and to this hundreds of year history of injustice and listening to the stories and hearts kind of breaking open. So we have people signing up for Rewire, like we're full waiting list. There are nonprofits in the city. I think all diversity consultants are overbooked and
Yeah.
I mean seriously, because people now want to do the work. And we know a lot of organizations have put out statements, but now it's like, well, what's the plan, right? Don't put out a statement until you're ready to take on the transformation, right?
Absolutely.
The work behind the words. And people are wanting to do it, and there's almost I like what you said about discomfort. There's almost a desperate feeling, like, caught, guilty as charged. Now I want to do something. Like, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do.
And I think a part of that being uncomfortable for white people is that I really think that for a lot of white folks, they've always wanted to speak out, but just didn't know how, was afraid that maybe family members, parents who came from that era, jobs, employers would say something. And so I believe that what's taken place over the last few weeks with the killing of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, back to back to back, I believe that attitudes are shifting, whereas before, like with Trayvon or Mike Brown or even with Terrence, things were isolated. Oh, those are just isolated incidents. But now I think that light bulb is coming on where people are starting to see that this is a broader issue that needs to be addressed. And I believe that what happened across this globe, even in Boise, Idaho, where people are screaming Black Lives Matter, I think it freed a lot of white folks. I think they were just like, I can speak out now.
But I do think it's a unique time. One person described it, I think it's also because of COVID-19, right? You were saying people are seeing, they're seeing it's all connected.
Absolutely.
And then also they're seeing the impact on the health of Black Americans and the impact on education, and that food is tied to schools and healthcare is tied to jobs, and that's not working. And one colleague said it's like the planes are landed right now. So much isn't working, right? Baseball players aren't playing, football players aren't playing, universities are closed, all these institutions are on pause. So we have this opportunity to really change how we run things, how we do things. So getting leaders in place who understand that and are ready to make big changes, it does feel like the time is now for that as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm really in disbelief about what I've been seeing. I never thought, that we would be in this place where in Congress, they're introducing legislation as it relates to policing. Never would have thought. I've been to Capitol Hill twice. I took this fight to Capitol Hill, and the same legislation that they introduced just last week was a part of the recommendations that I made. And I sat on the sofa and I listened to Nancy Pelosi and her team and Representative Nadler read my recommendations word for word. And a tear just ran down my face because at that moment I said, you know what, this fight hasn't been in vain. We have so much more work to do. But just think if back then, a year ago, if they would have taken those considerations and those recommendations, maybe George Floyd would still be here. Maybe Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery would still be here. And so I'm glad that there's been an awakening, but we still have so much more work to do.
So much more work to do. So much more work to do. So we're organizing here around voting. getting out the vote, getting people registered to vote, getting people to use mail-in ballots. Do you have any thoughts about that in Tulsa, how to engage more people in voting?
I think it's probably one of the most important things that we'll do in the next few months. Every organization, every civic organization, nonprofit, I believe we should all be creating voter education and registration arms of those organizations because everything is at stake right now. Our lives depend on it. And so, for example, with the Juneteenth, we expected about 10,000 people, and I believe we had that many people coming in and out, maybe about 8,500 according to our numbers. But I made sure before we had Reverend Al Sharpton, before we had the singers, the bands, the food booths, that we had voter registration. Because that's the only way we're going to.
Good for you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
We
That's
had
cool. I
voter
didn't see that.
registration.
That's great.
We had the U.S. Census people there.
Nice. So important.
We had the 802 initiative
Yes.
there, the 805 initiative. Those are
Good.
kitchen table issues that everyone is concerned about. Healthcare, you know,
Good.
and so
So good to hear.
very,
So good to
very
hear.
important. It's our birthright,
Yeah.
and we all need to get there. And so that's going to be a mission of mine and a focus of mine as we push into November.
And I'm guessing that our time is close up, but before we stop, I want to ask, you said, I know you said, you hoped I wouldn't ask you that question. We're coming full circle. That how are you taking care of yourself? Because it's so hard when there is so much pain and so much need, and you're called, so that you're just going to keep on doing this hard work. And I can feel the strength of your faith. And we're in a church this morning with people of faith of all different kinds, not always a faith in a God the way you might talk about God, but people who we all draw from some source for strength and inspiration and solace and comfort in times of trouble. I think it would be wonderful to hear from you just a word about that, your relationship with God and how that keeps you going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. And just being again here in this place, this is where I get my solace from. Terrence, my twin brother, through his struggle with addiction, he always found himself back in this safe place, a place that we grew up in. That's all we knew all of our lives. With my parents being gospel musicians and ministers, we were in church literally 7 days a week.
Wow.
And so I don't know anything else. I wake up at 4:30 every morning and I feed my mind with my daily devotion to starve my doubt every single morning, because I know that my own thoughts are too toxic to navigate this world, to navigate this fight in this city that we're dealing with. And so I have to feed my mind with something good and detoxify it and replenish it with love and God's word. And so that's something that I've done for the last decade. I can't leave my house without spending that time with God. That's my cup of coffee. That's my cup of coffee. And so God has been the foundation of everything that it is that we do as we fight these injustices. So I get up, pick up my axe, and I do what I can to chop down the trees of racism and bigotry and hate. And my parents, my mom and dad, they instilled that. If they didn't teach us anything, they taught us that there was a higher power, that's controlling everything. And so I see God in everything that it is that we do, even this past weekend with Donald Trump coming, and the way this city was able to come together, every walk of life, every faith, and drown out and silence hate was simply beautiful, simply beautiful. And so I'm appreciative of our white allies, because I have to be a woman and I have to be Black. That's another layer of discrimination that I have to deal with, as a woman. So I'm asking all of my white women and my white allies, help us with that woman part, because psychologically we don't get to say,
Pay attention to that
hey,
part.
yeah, come, see you when you get back home to our children. we have to be concerned if they're going to come back home. And so we stay prayed up in my household, and I believe that God's supernatural strength is the reason that I'm still standing and that we're still fighting. And Terrence's prophecy to me, our last conversation when he said that God is going to get the glory out of his life, I believe that everything that's happening is living proof, and that it's my duty to make sure that that prophecy is fulfilled.
Thank you so much. Those are powerful, powerful words. I'm imagining people I know and love listening to what you said over and over and over again to give themselves strength, and it brings tears to my eyes. And what I hear is that your faith allows you to not meet hate with hate, but to meet hate with love, which is an incredibly profound spiritual strength. And against all odds, you're doing that. And that's an incredible gift and role model for all of us, And I'm really grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this conversation.